Cyrus Oliver, a 17-year-old high school football player, died from overhydration. After hot summer practice, Oliver reportedly drank 4 gallons of fluid in a short period of time because he felt dehydrated. Oliver developed hyponatremia, or low sodium level in the blood, after he went home, where he later collapsed. Then he was hospitalized and was on life support for 6 days until the doctors told the family he would never recover. When we think of dehydration, especially exercise-induced dehydration, the more water we drink, the better it is. In not all cases, it actually does the opposite. Keeping that homeostasis in your body and your mineral electrolyte balance is crucial for your body function. So in this video, we will discuss the importance of salt or sodium and why we don't need to be afraid of it so much.
Alright, welcome back. Let's talk about sodium. So we know that too much sodium in your blood causes the water pull back in, and because of that, your blood vessels will be puffy and there's so much water inside, causing the high blood pressure. So the high blood pressure will cause any other chronic heart diseases, strokes, heart attacks, which is globally known as the most dominant cause of death. Since the Dietary Guidelines in 1980 was introduced in the United States, the reputation for sodium and salt had a negative effect. But regardless of the guidelines, the average American sodium intake has not been changed in the past 60 years, averaging about 3,700 milligrams per day. Remember, the recommended guideline for the Americans is 2,300 milligrams per day. So according to the World Health Organization data acquired in 2018, the coronary heart disease death in South Korea reached about 26,000. That's about 10.5% of total death, makes them rank at 183 in the world. So if you compare this to the United States, the US have 500,000 deaths, or 20.8 of total deaths, which making them rank at 139. Well, the average Korean consumes about 5,250 milligrams of sodium per day. And out of this total number, 19.6% of the sodium intake coming from the kimchi. Kimchi is the traditional side dish that's salted and fermented and very tasty that you eat basically with every single meal. In a study conducted by Korean Center Disease Control and Prevention, over 27,000 people were included to observe the correlation between sodium intake as well as the cardiovascular disease prevalence. The study found that there is no correlation between sodium intake and cardiovascular disease, even when some of the quartiles of the population were consuming over 7,000 milligrams of sodium per day. However, the study revealed that as the sodium intake increases, the potassium intake as well increase, which correlates into lower risk of cardiovascular disease. So you can see sodium intake is not the only factor for cardiovascular disease, which I hope most of you guys are aware of. Now, another study conducted by Jung-Hoi Park and his colleagues found that average South Koreans step about 7,280 steps per day. And of course, this number is a pre-COVID number, and when the COVID hits, this number decreased to about 5,700 steps per day. Now, if you think about it, this number is about 600 steps higher than average American pre-COVID. Okay, if we do a quick calculation between these two countries, will be
7280 minus 5117 will be
2,163 steps. Well, that's about 1.6 kilometers or about 1 mile. And that could burn about 100 calories per day. Well, then you might ask how these differences could potentially influence your risk of cardiovascular disease or your risk of mortality. Well, I got some data for you. According to a meta-analysis study conducted in 2021, the relationship between your step counts per day as well as the risk of all-cause mortality and the cardiovascular disease was significant. Well, they found that increasing your step count per day by only 1,000 steps decreases the all-cause mortality by 23%, and just increasing the steps by 500 steps will decrease the risk of cardiovascular disease by 6%. That's huge.
Sometimes they say huge.
So I'm telling you all this so you guys can see the sodium intake is not only the factor that leads into this cardiovascular or chronic diseases. Alright, let's get into the more positives of salt/sodium. But first things first, you have to understand what's the difference between salt and sodium. Basically the kind of same, but salt is composed of two different elements, which is sodium and chloride. So sodium, about 40% of in the salt is sodium and 60% is chloride. So if you eat about 1 grams or 1,000 milligrams of salt, basically you're consuming about 400 milligrams of sodium. So there are many things that sodium plays a role in your body to let you function properly. So starting with the vitamin C delivery to your brain, pulling of the vitamin C for absorption in your GI tract, neural adaptation, neural maturation, myelin sheath formation, bone formation, action potential generation, muscle contraction. So as you can see, that's a lot of things. I just used a lot of sodium to vomit out all those words to you. So now let's start talking about low sodium levels. Low sodium level is known as hyponatremia, which we talked about in the intro. So about 135 to 145 milliequivalent liters or MEQ per liters is considered as a normal sodium level in your body, and when your sodium level drops below 135, it's considered as low sodium level. And this can be caused by many factors like water overconsumption, excessive long duration exercise, vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, or taking diuretic medicines, drinking too much coffee. But I will be talking more about the exercise-induced or long-duration exercise-induced hyponatremia. So when you exercise and sweat, the average concentration of sodium in your sweat is about 1,100 milligrams per liter. But this can be varied person to person. For me, I sweat a lot. When I drink water, I'll be sweating. When I eat food, I'll be sweating. So I need to replenish and recover all those lost sodiums in my blood. So to understand how much sodium you lose in your sweat depends on two things: the sweat rate and the concentration of your sodium in your sweat. So if you assume your sweat rate is about 1.5 liters per hour, and assuming you have average saltiness in your sweat, you will be losing about 1700 milligrams per hour. Now if you fail to replenish the electrolytes, including the sodium that you lost during the exercise, it'll result in acute effects like headache, low energy, muscle cramps, vomiting, nausea, and so on. However, if you're eating too clean and exercising daily, sweating a lot, losing a lot of electrolytes and sodium, it'll result in chronic effects. So according to a review study from Journal of Clinical Medicine showed that the chronic hyponatremia can result in gait cycle deficiency, instability in your walking, increased risk of falling and fractures, osteoporosis, and any other cognitive deficiencies. So it is very important for you guys to acknowledge and sink that information in your head about the sodium and salt that I just talked about in this video, and make sure you guys understand that salt or sodium is not your enemy, not all cases. Alright, thank you for watching. I hope you guys learned something from this video. If you like science, fitness, and tips, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe to my channel.